She told me I was handsome while I was packing up my tools, and I almost dropped my screwdriver. I'm Marcus, 26 years old, and I fix electrical problems for a living. I work for a company called Northwest Electric Solutions in Portland, Oregon. Most days I drive around fixing broken outlets and replacing old light switches. It's honest work and it pays my bills while I save money to start my own business someday. That Tuesday started like any other day. I woke up at 6, ate cereal, checked my phone for the day's work orders, and headed out. My first job was at a small office building downtown where some circuit breakers kept tripping. Easy fix. Took me about an hour. While I was finishing up, my phone buzzed with a new assignment from dispatch. A woman in the hills outside the city needed someone to look at her garage lights. They were flickering on and off randomly, and she wanted it fixed today. I typed the address into my GPS and started driving. The house was about 30 minutes away from downtown. As I got closer, the neighborhoods changed. The houses got bigger. The lawns got greener. The cars in the driveways got more expensive. When I finally pulled up to the address, I had to slow down and double-check I was at the right place. It was a huge modern house with 3 stories, massive windows, and a long curved driveway. There was an automatic black gate at the entrance, but it was already open and waiting for me. I drove through slowly, feeling a little out of place. My work van looked pretty beat up compared to everything else around here. I parked near the garage and grabbed my tool bag from the back. Before I could even knock on the door, it opened. A woman stepped out and I had to remind myself to stay professional. She was probably in her early 30s, tall, with reddish-brown hair pulled back into a casual bun. She wore black leggings and a fitted gray top that looked simple but probably cost more than my entire outfit. What really stood out was the way she carried herself. Confident, like she owned the world and knew it. She glanced at me quickly, then looked down at her smartwatch. "You're the electrician for the garage?" she asked. Her voice was calm but businesslike. "No smile. No worms. Just straight to the point." "Yes, ma'am. I'm Marcus from Northwest Electric Solutions," I said, trying to sound confident. "The work order said you're having issues with flickering lights?" She pointed toward the garage without saying much. "They turn off randomly when I open the garage door. Sometimes they come back on by themselves. Sometimes they don't. It's annoying and I need it fixed." "Got it," I said. "I'll check it out and get it working properly." She didn't respond. She just turned around and walked back inside through a door that connected the garage to the main house. The door closed behind her and I was alone. I set my tool bag down and started looking around. The garage was cleaner than most living rooms I'd been in. 2 cars were parked inside, both expensive looking. The floors were spotless. Everything was organized perfectly. I started checking the lights. I flipped the switches a few times, opened and closed the garage door, and watched what happened. Sure enough, the lights would flicker and sometimes go completely dark. I grabbed my ladder and climbed up to get a closer look at the wiring. It didn't take long to figure out the problem. Someone had installed a cheap motion sensor and hadn't wired it correctly. The connections were loose and the sensor itself was old and worn out. Whoever did this job before me had rushed through it and done sloppy work. I hate seeing stuff like that. It makes all electricians look bad. I turned off the power at the breaker box to make sure I wouldn't get shocked, then got to work. I removed the old motion sensor completely, stripped back the wires, and reconnected everything the right way. Then I installed a new sensor, one that was actually built to last. The whole job took me about 2.5 hours because I wanted to make sure everything was perfect. I tested it multiple times, opening and closing the garage door over and over to make sure the lights responded correctly every single time. During all of this, I didn't hear a sound from inside the house. No music. No TV. No footsteps. Nothing. It was like she'd completely forgotten I was there. When I was finally satisfied that everything worked perfectly, I turned the power back on at the breaker box and ran one final test. The lights came on smoothly when the garage door opened and stayed on for exactly the right amount of time before shutting off automatically. Perfect. I packed up all my tools, made sure I hadn't left any mess behind, and walked over to the interior door. I knocked and waited. A few seconds passed. Then I heard footsteps. The door opened and she stepped back into the garage. This time she wasn't looking at her phone. She walked right up to where I was standing and watched as I demonstrated the motion sensor. I opened the garage door and the lights came on immediately, bright and steady. "Finally," she said, and I noticed the tiniest hint of a smile. "They actually work the way they're supposed to." "Yeah," I replied, nodding. It was definitely the wiring. The old sensor was installed wrong and it was cheap quality. I put in a better one, so you shouldn't have any more problems. She crossed her arms and looked at me a little differently than before, like she was actually seeing me instead of just seeing a worker. "You're good at what you do," she said. "I can tell." "Thank you," I said. "I try to do things right." Then she said something that completely caught me off guard. "You're handsome. Has anyone told you that recently?" I blinked. My brain kind of froze for a second. Thank you," I managed to say, letting out an awkward laugh because I didn't know what else to do. She smiled again, and this time it felt real. Not polite, not fake, actually genuine. Then she leaned against the doorframe in a relaxed way. "So Marcus, what do you do when you're not fixing things?" I was definitely not expecting this conversation. I've had friendly customers before, people who chat while I work, but this felt different. "Honestly, not much," I said. "Work keeps me pretty busy most days. I'm not really into going out to bars or clubs. I like quiet nights at home and getting up early. That's more my speed." She nodded slowly like she understood. "That's actually refreshing to hear. I'm not into that whole scene either." That surprised me. Looking at her, looking at this house, I would have guessed she spent weekends at fancy parties and exclusive events. She looked like someone you'd see in a magazine. But the way she said it sounded honest. "People make a lot of assumptions when you look a certain way," she continued. "It gets tiring after a while." I nodded, not really sure what to say to that. Then she said something even more unexpected. "I know this probably sounds random, but would you want to meet up sometime this weekend?" I felt my eyebrows go up. "Like, hang out?" "Yeah," she said simply. "You and me. Somewhere quiet, somewhere peaceful. You don't have to answer right now if you need to think about it." I hesitated, but only for a couple seconds. "I'd like that," I said. Her smile got a little bit wider. "Great. I'll send you a message with the details. And thanks again for fixing the lights properly." She turned and walked back inside, closing the door behind her. I stood there for a moment, just staring at the closed door, trying to process what had just happened. Then I picked up my tool bag, walked back to my van, got inside, and sat there in silence. What just happened? I started the engine and pulled out of the driveway, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. A woman who lived in a house like that, who drove cars like those, had just asked me to hang out. Me, an electrician who showed up to fix her garage lights. The rest of that day felt strange and disconnected. I went to my next job, fixed a faulty outlet at someone's home office, made small talk about the weather, and left. But the whole time I kept thinking about her. I kept replaying the conversation in my head. "You're handsome. Would you want to meet up this weekend?" I didn't even know her name. I checked my phone 47 times on Wednesday and nothing. Thursday came and went. Still nothing. By Friday afternoon, I had pretty much convinced myself that the whole thing was just her being polite, or maybe even some kind of weird joke that rich people play on regular working guys like me. Maybe she told her friends about it later and they all laughed. Can you believe I asked the electrician out? Just for fun. That's what I kept telling myself. It didn't matter anyway. People say things they don't mean all the time. But then Friday at 1 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed while I was sitting in my van eating a sandwich between jobs. Unknown number. I opened the message and my heart actually jumped. "Hey, it's Sophia from the Garage Lights. Still interested in Sunday? I can pick you up. 1 o'clock. Send me your location." So her name was Sophia, and she remembered, and she actually wanted to meet up. I sat there staring at the message for probably a full minute before I responded. I didn't want to send her my apartment address. That felt too personal too fast. So I dropped a pin for a public park near a coffee shop that wasn't too far from where I lived. Neutral ground. Safe. Normal. She replied almost immediately with a thumbs up emoji. That was it. No other details. No explanation of where we were going or what we were doing. Just a thumbs up. The rest of Friday dragged on forever. Saturday was even worse. I woke up early even though I had nothing planned. I cleaned my apartment even though it wasn't that messy. I went to the gym. I did laundry. I tried watching a movie but couldn't focus. My mind kept jumping ahead to Sunday. What was I supposed to wear? Where were we going? What would we even talk about? Sunday morning I was awake before my alarm went off. I took a long shower, then stood in front of my closet trying to decide what to wear. I pulled out 4 different shirts and held them up one by one. They all looked basically the same. Casual button-ups in different shades of blue and gray. I finally picked a dark blue one that looked clean and decent. Then I spent too long trying to decide if I should tuck it in or leave it out. I left it out. I trimmed my beard in the bathroom mirror, making sure it looked neat but not too perfect. I wanted to look like I made an effort but not like I was trying too hard. I put on my cleanest pair of sneakers, checked myself one more time in the mirror, and headed out. I got to the park at 12:45. Way too early. I sat on a bench near the parking lot and pretended to scroll through my phone, but really I was watching every car that came in. My leg was bouncing up and down without me even realizing it. At exactly 4 minutes past 1, I heard an engine that sounded expensive and powerful. I looked up and felt my stomach flip. She was driving a dark blue Tesla, the really fast kind that costs as much as a small house. The windows were down and she had big sunglasses on. Her hair was loose and blowing in the breeze. She looked like she belonged in a commercial. Every single person in that park turned to look. Some people stared. A couple of kids pointed. And then everyone looked at me when she pulled up right next to where I was sitting. She waved through the window. Marcus! I stood up, suddenly very aware of how normal I looked compared to everything about her. I walked over and opened the passenger door. That's me. Get in, she said with a grin. The inside of the car was incredible. The seats were this soft cream-colored leather that felt expensive just to touch. Everything was clean and perfect. She smelled like something citrus mixed with something I couldn't identify but knew probably cost $100 a bottle. As soon as I closed the door, she pulled out of the parking lot and onto the main road. So where are we going? I asked, trying to sound casual. There's a place I go when I need to clear my head, she said, keeping her eyes on the road. I think you'll really like it. Just trust me. We drove out of the city and onto the highway. The scenery started changing from buildings and streets to trees and hills. We talked a little bit, but mostly we just listened to the quiet hum of the car and the wind coming through the windows. It felt comfortable, not awkward. After about 50 minutes, she turned off onto a smaller road that wound through thick forests of tall pine trees. Then she turned again onto a gravel road that looked like it didn't get much traffic. I started hearing water before I saw anything. She parked near what looked like a trailhead and turned off the car. We walk from here, she said. We got out and she led me down a narrow dirt path through the trees. It wasn't a long walk, maybe 6 or 7 minutes, but it felt like we were going deeper into a completely different world. Then the path opened up and I stopped walking. In front of us was a waterfall. Not a massive one, but beautiful. Water poured over dark rocks into a clear pool below. The whole area was surrounded by huge trees and moss-covered boulders. The sound of the water was loud but calming at the same time. It was one of the most peaceful places I'd ever seen. Wow, I said, because I couldn't think of anything else. Sophia walked over to one of the flat rocks near the edge of the pool and sat down. She slipped off her sandals and put her feet in the water. I followed her and did the same. The water was freezing cold, but it felt amazing. For a few minutes we just sat there in silence, listening to the waterfall. Then she spoke, but she didn't look at me. She kept her eyes on the water. I know what you're probably thinking. What's that? I asked. You're wondering why someone like me would invite someone like you to a place like this. I didn't say anything because she was exactly right. That's exactly what I'd been wondering since the moment she texted me. She took a breath and continued. My dad owns a huge commercial real estate company. My mom runs a venture capital firm. I grew up in houses like the one you saw. Actually, that's the smallest one my family owns. I had everything handed to me: private schools, expensive cars, connections to important people. All of it. I stayed quiet and let her talk. But growing up like that, everyone treats you like a symbol instead of a person. I was always the rich girl, the one with everything. Guys wanted to date me because of what I represented, not because of who I actually was. Girls either wanted to be my friend so they could use me, or they hated me out of jealousy. I never felt like anyone actually saw me, the real me, not until recently. Not until when? I asked carefully. She finally turned and looked at me. Not until you. You came to my house, did your job, didn't ask me a single question about my life or my family. You didn't try to impress me. You didn't stare at my house or my cars. You just fixed the lights, said thank you, and were about to leave. That's so rare. You were just yourself. I felt something tighten in my chest. I didn't know what to say. I thought maybe you were messing with me, I admitted. Like this was some kind of social experiment or joke. She shook her head. I get why you'd think that, but I promise you I wasn't. I'm not. The silence between us felt heavy but not uncomfortable. Then she smiled just a little bit. I'm not looking for anything complicated. I just wanted to spend time with someone who doesn't have an agenda. Someone real. Does that make sense? Complete sense, I said. No expectations. No pressure. Exactly. We sat there on that rock for over an hour just talking. She told me about feeling trapped in her family's expectations. I told her about wanting to start my own business but being scared to take the risk. We talked about music we liked, places we wanted to visit someday, embarrassing moments from high school. It was the most honest conversation I'd had with anyone in months, maybe years. The sun started getting lower in the sky and the light changed from bright to golden. Sophia stood up and brushed off her jeans. We should probably head back before it gets dark. Yeah, I agreed, standing up too. But I'm really glad you brought me here. Me too, she said, and she meant it. The drive back felt different than the drive there. We didn't talk as much, but it wasn't because we had nothing to say. It was because we didn't need to fill the silence with words. Felt natural. When we got back to the park where she'd picked me up, she pulled into the same spot and put the car in park. I reached for the door handle but stopped and turned to look at her. Will I see you again? I asked. She didn't answer right away. She looked at me for a few long seconds, like she was deciding something. Then she said, maybe, if you reach out. I nodded, opened the door, and stepped out. I closed the door gently and stood there as she drove away. I watched until her car disappeared completely. Then I walked to my van, got in, and just sat there. That wasn't a normal date. It wasn't like anything I'd ever experienced before, but it felt like the start of something. I just didn't know what yet. The weird part about the next week was that Sophia didn't text me at all. Not even once. I kept checking my phone between jobs, during lunch breaks, before bed. Nothing. Just silence. At first I thought maybe she was busy. Rich people probably have packed schedules, right? Important meetings and events and whatever else people like her do. But by Wednesday I started wondering if I'd done something wrong at the waterfall. Maybe I talked too much. Or maybe not enough. Maybe she decided I was too boring or too different from her world. By Friday I was pretty much convinced that our day together was just a one-time thing. She got whatever she needed out of it and now she was done. I was just the working guy she could be honest with for one afternoon because I didn't matter enough to judge her. That thought stung more than I wanted to admit. But then I remembered what she said before I got out of her car. Maybe if you reach out. She didn't say she'd text me. She said maybe if I reached out to her. She was waiting for me to make the next move. Friday evening I was sitting in my apartment eating leftover pizza and staring at my phone. My thumb hovered over her contact name for probably 10 minutes before I finally just did it. I called her. She picked up on the third ring. Hey! Her voice sounded warm. Happy even. Hey, it's Marcus, I said, suddenly feeling nervous. I know, she said, and I could hear a smile in her voice. I was starting to wonder if you were going to call. That caught me off guard. You were? Yeah, I wasn't sure if you were interested or just being polite at the waterfall. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I'm definitely interested. I was actually worried you weren't. She laughed softly. I'm interested too. So, I said, feeling a bit more confident now. Would you want to meet up again? Tomorrow, maybe? This time I'll plan something. There was a pause. Then she said, I'd really like that. We agreed on Sunday afternoon. I told her I'd pick her up this time. She didn't ask where we were going. She just said okay and that she'd be ready at 1. After we hung up, I sat there grinning like an idiot. Then reality hit me. I had to plan something. Something good. Something that would impress her but still feel genuine and not like I was trying too hard. I thought about it all night. Fancy restaurant? No, that felt like I was trying to compete with her lifestyle. Movie? Too casual and we wouldn't even talk. Then it hit me. Picnic. Simple, personal, and we could actually spend time together. Saturday I went into preparation mode. I borrowed a nice thick blanket from my mom without telling her why. I went to the grocery store and bought supplies to make sandwiches. Good bread, turkey, cheese, lettuce, tomatoes. I got fresh strawberries and grapes. I bought glass bottles of lemonade because they felt classier than plastic. I even found a small cooler at a thrift store to keep everything cold. Then I did something I never do. I went online and rented a car for the day. Not anything fancy, just a clean gray Honda Accord that looked presentable. My work van was reliable, but it smelled like electrical tape and had tools rattling around in the back. Not exactly romantic. Sunday I woke up early and made the sandwiches carefully, cutting them into neat triangles like I'd seen in movies. I packed everything into the cooler with ice packs, folded the blanket, and loaded it all into the rental car. Then I drove to Sophia's house. When I pulled up, she was already outside waiting on the front steps. She wore a soft purple sweater and dark jeans. Her hair was down and natural. No makeup that I could see. No designer sunglasses. She looked relaxed and real. She walked over with a smile and got in the passenger seat. Hey, picnic guy, she said. I laughed. Ready for a surprise? Always. I drove us out of the city, heading toward a place I used to go with my grandfather when I was a kid. It took about 40 minutes to get there. A big open meadow near a pine forest with a view of the hills. The sky stretched out forever above us and everything was quiet except for birds and wind in the trees. We parked under some shade and carried everything out to a perfect spot in the middle of the meadow. I spread out the blanket and started unpacking the food. Sophia sat down cross-legged and looked around with this expression I couldn't quite read. When's the last time you did something like this? I asked as I poured lemonade into 2 plastic cups. Like a picnic? She asked. No. Like something that wasn't planned perfectly or designed to look good on social media. Something just for the sake of doing it. She was quiet for a moment. I honestly can't remember. We ate and talked about random things. She told me about her job in marketing for a startup that made eco-friendly packaging. It sounded interesting, but she said it mostly felt like pushing products she didn't really care about. I told her more about my dream of starting my own electrical business, training young guys who wanted to learn a trade instead of going to college. She asked real questions and actually listened to my answers. At one point she tried to peel an orange and made a complete mess of it, getting juice all over her hands. We both laughed and I showed her the easier way to do it. The conversation flowed naturally. No pressure. No awkwardness. Then there was a shift. She got quiet and stared off toward the trees. The sunlight hit her face at an angle that made her look almost peaceful. She turned to me slowly. You know what I keep thinking about? She asked. What? The way you looked at me that first day, and every time since. You don't look at me like you want something from me. Not my money. Not my connections. Not even my attention, really. You just look at me like I'm a normal person. That's so rare in my life. I didn't know what to say to that. My throat felt tight. Then she leaned forward just slightly, and I met her halfway without thinking. The kiss was soft and slow, not rushed or dramatic. It felt natural, like we were confirming something we both already knew. When we pulled back, she smiled gently. I was hoping you'd do that. I wasn't totally sure I should, I admitted. You're kind of intimidating. She laughed. I know. I do it on purpose. Keeps people at a distance until I figure out if they're worth letting in. We spent the next hour just lying on the blanket side by side, looking up at the clouds moving slowly across the sky. At some point she reached over and took my hand. Her fingers laced through mine and it felt right. I don't know exactly what this is between us, she said quietly, still looking up at the sky. But I really like it. Me too, I said. On the drive back neither of us talked much, but it wasn't uncomfortable. She rested her hand on the center console and I held it while I drove. When we got to her house, I pulled right up to the front door instead of making her walk from the gate. Before she got out, she turned to me. Text me, she said. Anytime. About anything. I mean it. I will, I promised. She leaned over and kissed me one more time, quick and sweet, then got out and walked to her door. She turned and waved before going inside. I sat there for a minute, just processing everything. Then I drove the rental car back, returned it, got in my van, and drove home with this feeling in my chest I couldn't quite name. It wasn't just happiness. It was something deeper. Hope, maybe. Like I was building something real with someone who actually saw me. That night she texted me first. Just a simple message that said, "Thank you for today." It was perfect. I smiled and texted back. "Thank you for giving me a chance." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally her message came through. "You're not what I expected. You're better." I fell asleep that night feeling like something in my life had shifted in a direction I never saw coming but was grateful for anyway. 3 months later I was standing in Sophia's kitchen at 9 at night helping her paint the walls. That probably sounds random, but let me explain how we got there. After the picnic, Sophia and I started seeing each other regularly. Not every single day because we both had our own lives and responsibilities, but enough that it became normal. She'd text me good morning. I call her during lunch breaks. We'd make plans for weekends and actually keep them. It felt easy in a way I didn't know relationships could feel. But easy doesn't mean simple. Dating someone like Sophia came with complications I didn't expect. The first time she invited me to a dinner party with her friends, I wore my nicest shirt and still felt completely out of place. Everyone there was talking about investment portfolios and startup acquisitions and vacation homes in places I'd never been. One guy asked me what I did, and when I said I was an electrician, he actually laughed and said, "Oh, so you're the help," like it was a joke. Sophia heard him, and the look she gave him could have frozen fire. Later in the car she apologized and I told her it was fine, but honestly it stung. Not because I was ashamed of my job, but because it made me realize how different our worlds really were. I started noticing other things too. When we went out to restaurants, people recognized her. Not like she was famous, but like she was someone, part of a certain social circle. They'd look at me with confusion, trying to figure out why she was with someone so ordinary. My boss noticed I was distracted at work. I started turning down overtime because I wanted to spend time with Sophia instead. For someone who'd always defined himself by how hard he worked, that felt strange and a little scary. One night we were at my apartment and Sophia was looking around at my small living room, my secondhand furniture, my kitchen counter that had a permanent crack in it. "You've built a good life here," she said, and she sounded genuine. "It's not much," I said, feeling a little embarrassed. "But it's mine." She sat down on my old couch and pulled her knees up to her chest. "I really like it here. Feels real. My house feels like a museum sometimes. Beautiful but empty." That night we talked for hours about our lives, our frustrations, our dreams. She told me she was thinking about quitting her job. She was tired of pretending to care about marketing metrics for products she didn't believe in. She wanted to do something that mattered to her, maybe something creative. I told her I was finally serious about starting my own business. I'd been saving money and researching what it would take to get licensed and buy a work van. But I was scared. Scared of failing. Scared of losing the stability I had. Then Sophia said something that surprised me. "What if we helped each other? Like really helped each other build what we want?" I looked at her. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm good at marketing and branding and all that business stuff I claim to hate. And you're good at actually building things and solving problems. What if we worked together? I sat with that idea for a minute. You'd help me start my business? If you'd let me, she said. Not because I think you need saving or anything like that, but because I believe in you. And honestly, it would give me something real to work on instead of selling packaging nobody cares about. That conversation happened 2 months ago. Since then, things shifted in ways I never imagined. Sophia started helping me put together a real business plan. She designed a logo that actually looked professional. She built me a website. She helped me figure out pricing and how to market myself to customers. I was still doing my regular job during the day, but in the evenings and on weekends I was building something that was actually mine. And Sophia seemed happier than I'd ever seen her. She quit her marketing job and started taking art classes. She'd always loved painting but never had time for it. Now she was creating things every day and her whole energy changed. She seemed lighter, more herself. But the best part was that we were doing it together. Not in some codependent way where we needed each other to function, but in a partnership way where we made each other better. Which brings me back to that night in her kitchen. Sophia had decided she wanted to repaint her kitchen walls from boring beige to a deep blue color she'd fallen in love with. She asked if I'd help, and I said yes, even though painting wasn't really my thing. We'd been working for about 2 hours. Music playing from her phone, both of us covered in paint splatters. She was standing on a ladder reaching for a high corner, and I was watching to make sure she didn't fall. "You know what's funny?" she said, not looking down at me. "What?" 5 months ago, if someone told me I'd be dating the electrician who came to fix my garage lights, I would have thought they were insane. I smiled. 5 months ago, if someone told me the woman who owned that house would actually care about me, I would have thought the same thing. She climbed down from the ladder and stood in front of me. She had blue paint on her cheek. "I don't just care about you, Marcus. I love you." My heart stopped for a second. We hadn't said that yet. We'd been close to it, dancing around it, but nobody had actually said the words. "I love you too," I said, and I meant it completely. She kissed me and we stood there in her half-painted kitchen, covered in paint, just holding each other. A few weeks after that, Sophia and I drove back to the waterfall where we'd had our first real conversation. We brought coffee and donuts this time and sat on the same flat rock with our feet in the freezing water. My arm was around her shoulders. Her head rested against me. We watched the water pour over the rocks and listened to the sound it made. "I never thought I'd fall for the guy who came to fix my lights," she said quietly. I kissed the top of her head. "I never thought the woman who owned that house would see anything in me worth keeping around." She lifted her head and looked at me. "You're not just the electrician anymore. You know that, right? You're so much more than that." I nodded because she was right. I wasn't just defined by my work anymore. I was Marcus who was building a business. Marcus who was in love. Marcus who was becoming the person he always wanted to be. I'm still 26. I'm still figuring things out one step at a time. But now I have someone who sees me, really sees me, for who I am underneath everything else. And that changes everything in the best possible way. Sophia comes from money and I come from hard work. We're from completely different worlds. But we're choosing to build something new together. Something that's ours. No drama. No pretending. Just two people who found each other in the most unexpected way and decided to see where it could go. Real. Messy. Imperfect. And absolutely worth it.